Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on our website, womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our declaration on women's sex-based rights, which has been signed by 34,481 people from 160 countries and is supported by 486 organisations. We have over 100 volunteer activists, including 53 country contacts, engaged in defending women's sex-based rights, and would love it if you join us as a volunteer. Today, I'm really pleased to say our panellists are Shannon from the USA. The title of her talk is Mother of Trans, Danger Ahead, personal experience of deprogramming her daughter, and she's well now. The next speaker is Sonia Gallego from the UK, and her talk is called Media Matters, Sex, Gender and Accuracy. She's an international broadcast journalist who has reported from around Europe on politics and society. Then we're going to hear from Amanda, who is from Scotland, and she's going to talk about being in prison with a man. And she will be talking about her personal experience of being in a female prison with men and the impact this has on vulnerable women. Also to talk about the Scottish government's deplorable actions. And then finally, we have Jill Raymond, who is going to speak about a recent meeting in the House of Lords, what progress is being made, and also what happened there. So the first speaker I'm really pleased to introduce is Shannon, who is from the USA. She is a TERF MAMA who deprogrammed her ROGD, so rapid onset gender dysphoria, gifted daughter from the trans cult. She's going to talk about her personal experience and her now advocacy. So thank you so much for coming on. So over to you, Shannon.
So I start always with here she. Come gather round, share and speak freely. We must be here for each other. As Magdalene Burns said, I'd rather be rude than a liar. We need to speak truth. This one goes out for the moms. Every child is at risk, not only for falling for the trans cult, but being encouraged to do so. And believe me, it is a cult. I did some studying, and the transgender medical industrial complex is playing the long game and using all the tactics to do so. I wish to give you hope, and I wish to alarm you. I wish to give you knowledge and resources. Mom, you have more strength than you know, and my hope is that trans never haunts your home. I will be speaking as if you are fresh, as I was when this hit my home. So bear with me. I do bear good news, I promise. The wanted image you see is of the three main mascots, influencers, used in our schools globally to indoctrinate our children. And of course, a vile doctor holding literal buckets of breast tissue as a Christmas gift. This is what our daughters are knowing, our children. Trans pushers are ready to destroy your children's lives and bodies, your family, and often your livelihood, jobs, parental rights. The state is taking children and transing them. T is a verb, and don't think it's not about money. There is one child shown by our dear Exulansic, and by the age of 21, had already charged $1 million in medical bills. She had gone through sepsis and necrosis and almost died 4 times and was still believing in the trans cult. One doctor even called the removal of women's organs, because our insides necrotize due to the testosterone, they use a term jack-o'-lantern. Just use that image, not exactly respecting women and children. And they are doing this to minors. They become dependent patients for life. Not many sane people can think that a disability and dependency of medical care equals a life that is free. Isn't this why we keep the dangers and educate our children on everything else? Drugs, safety, making good choices? It's always about their future. Trans seems to stop that thought, as cults do. Read The Pronouns Are Rohypnol essay. Trans is not grassroots, and you need to know your country's laws, especially conversion therapy. Trans is the conversion. My name is Shannon. I am a full-blown mama TERF. In other words, a woman, a mother living in reality and fighting for women's liberation. Yes, still. Since you're hearing me and you have found WDI, please know you are in the right place. You have found women who will continue to weather this trans storm, to fight for you and for your children in life, law, health, and humanity. Many of these women are devoted and don't even have children themselves. And find us on social media. Let us hold you up, calm you down, and lend you an ear. Sharing and caring are universal bonds for women. You are not alone. Right here at WDI every Saturday, my heart fills up. The Women's Circle is the universal historical strength of humanity, a main reason that we were not made extinct. So mama, find one great friend to hold you up. Be ready to stand firm and know that you can do this. I even hired a guard outside my home. I had to threaten a couple who I'd loved for 10 years, a lesbian couple, with legal action to stop them from trying to indoctrinate my daughter. Many parents have moved away for months. You get one body. We only get one chance to raise them. This is your shining moment. This is not our gender neutral. Gender has turned against us. We must use the legal terms, sex. We don't sew wings on because our children want to fly. Women is the oldest fact of humanity, and if it can fall, so can every other fact. If sex-based rights fall to gender identity in the West, the world will gladly follow and throw away the rights, laws, and protections of women and children. We need every voice in this fight. Trans rights are human rights? Oh, no, no, no. No, trans already have the same human rights as everybody else in the West. What they want is to dissolve others' rights. It may soon be their right to have a parking spot closer than the handicap spaces. What, now driving is transphobic or blind phobic because blind people can't do it? We can't allow this manipulation. Male violence exists. Once that universal scourge is solved, then maybe then Munn can come and ask for us for a favor and ask us to move over. Thank you very much. As Andrea Dworkin said, they can't even give us a 24-hour respite from rape. A more comic way to look at it is Linda Blade says, anyone who grew up on a farm knows that a castrated bull does not make a cow. So in your life from your children, you may hear, oh, mommy, you're being silly. It's not about biological sex. It's not even about the act of sex. It's just who I am. This is my identity. These are the most dangerous words for anyone who has studied tyranny. It cuts to the core of human nature. Do not obey. I call this, from studying tyranny and authoritarianism, but I use the word participatory obedience, where people line up for their own destruction. We must always think one step more. Our identities are what we do, not what we declare. No, sex, both kinds, is exactly what trans is about. They want laws to fall, and unfortunately they are. So let's get some business out of the way. In case there are any pro-trans people here, we hope you listen. We hope you use democratic and diplomatic ways to engage, as we should in our civilized society. But you must know that the trans activists are physically attacking women, stopping women from speaking, even just to say adult human female. You've got to be open to listening. We must support free speech. This is what allows the tyranny. This is not gay plus. You have a future ahead, and we are here for you when you're ready. We are fighting for you. As Bertrand Russell said, the fundamental cause of trouble is that in the modern world, the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt. And we should be. We always have more to learn. Next, a message for the trans cult. If you're here, You cannot have our children. We will fight. I am more Mama Honey Badger on this one than Mama Bear. Woman is taken. Make your own word for whatever condition you suffer. No prefixes, no non-sex, no third gamete, no quarter. If medical consent at 12 for dismemberment becomes acceptable, then why not sexual consent? This is what they're after. You already have every human right as everyone else in the West, if not more, and certainly political power. And taking rights from others is not true equality. When we learn history, we see you. We will not obey. You call our children eggs to be cracked, we will protect them. No is a full sentence. Our lesbian daughters do not need to change anything. Same for our autistic children. 40% of teens are now identifying as T or Q. 65% are homosexual. 40% are autistic. Eugenics is not new. The facts. We must stick with facts and reality. Every cell is male or female. Intersex is a red herring giving trans license for biological exploitation. Just know. We get one body, there's two sexes, and only LGB. No third gamete, and puberty is not pathology. The only way to protect in law is with reality. We are the ones who stand for LGB. We stand for them to grow up, stay intact, be healthy, and love who they wish, without harming or taking from anyone. The cults, there's something from Stephen Hassan called the bite model. It's good to know it. Basics are, they don't allow outside information, they love bomb the newbies, they keep them engaged, they dead name. Leaving your family for a new glitter family. The old life is dead. The language changes. They literally demand a pound of flesh. So now for the good news. My young ROGD, trans, non-binary, genius teen daughter denounced the trans cult. Oh, sorry, I missed my spot. Sorry. After 7 months of my deprogramming, she stated on her own that she is done with it. She has since made it safely to 18. The irony for a mother to be grateful for puberty is not lost on me. To feel stronger for keeping her home from college? How can that not be cognitive dissonance? What mother could believe that that would be right outside of an addiction or trauma? I hired a 24-hour guard outside my home. I am but one person. But the teachings we instill are what we ourselves must uphold, and I taught my children. It is better to be preventative than curative. We get one body, and if you're lucky, it's a long life. If I hadn't stayed firm, I would have lost her. Her life, mind, body would be ruined today. I am grateful to you female fighters who inspire me. You gave us a future again. This cult is pervasive, powerful, insidious, and protected. Our children need us mamas, even if they think that they hate us for a while. My daughter wouldn't even remember what she said to me at that time. The brainwashing is so intense. Find detransitioners. Waffling Willow covers the cult aspects. Before I peaked, a word we use when we become aware of the truth of trans. The dangers I was watching for were the same as what I did for my older children. Porn, webcam, eating disorders, moods, late nights, hidden phones, cash, bad grades, cutting, drugs, weird smells, dilated pupils, bad friends, sneaking out, those things, all clear. She was graduating as a valedictorian at 16. Oh, sorry, I did it again. I'm touching something, sorry. Okay. But then, so she was graduating as valedictorian at 16, healthy, happy, a bright future. Got into colleges she wanted. What a happy day. What an accomplishment. But then the binder, I found the binder. A breast compression corset so you can seem flat-chested, look like a boy, or a non-binary. They also have the surgeries. I thought, what is this? Who is telling her her body is wrong? How could I not see this as an equivalent to the concept of breast ironing? Any strike against the female body is misogyny. Transing is a verb. Oh, how little I knew and what horrors I was about to find. As I had taught them, ignorance is not an option, so I had to learn and fast. I raised them saying, if I won't let someone else hurt you, I won't let you do so either. As an autodidact, I began researching, quickly learned not to trust any experts, no doctors, no therapists, and definitely not any LGBT plus center. I bought the books, Abigail, Helen, Kathleen, Kara, read Huxley and Orwell, joined YouTube Premium. I wasn't even on social media before. I was just dealing with the kids stuff. Damn, I was mad. If I had been on, I may have learned the truth earlier. As a US Democratic liberal, I was shocked. As a mom, I was pissed. Oh man. So my peak trans moment, I was listening to YouTube. I heard a clear, no nonsense British mom say, do you know how offensive it is to say the definition of a woman makes men feel unsafe? You all know her. It was Kelly J. Keane. Yes, yes, women matter. Our daughters deserve better. I can do this. So, advice. I told her the testosterone can drop almost 15 IQ points. That was a big scare, especially when she'd worked so hard. We cannot waste our rare talent in this world, and we do not help others if we bring ourselves down. We always must see it to lift others up. My advice, use spyware. The computers and devices are dangerous. It is a necessity. You need to know. The digital world is the next world, not Mars. China owns TikTok, and they are watching our children destroy themselves. Algorithms are studying your child's behavior. Every blink, pause is showing their interest. The algorithms pick up if you post pronouns, flags, etc. in games, chat rooms. Trans is as dangerous a trend as anorexia, which still has the highest rate of death for our teens, for now. Anorexia and trans can both take hold within 4 months. So start sleuthing, mama. We watched something called The Wave, a documentary from 1981, where a teacher did an experiment and turned his class into the Third Reich in just a few weeks. We need to know social engineering tactics. The signs to watch for: flags, pins, pronouns, anime. Even online, they're also a signal to others when you see these things, or in emails or at work, there's signal to others. Anime, trans friends, fluffing of their t-shirt to hide their breasts, slouching, neutral clothing. You'll see that the non-binary all look the same. Tape, binders, acne, facial hair, insults toward women, sensitivity to names, pronouns, words, cis, envy, lowering your voice, cutting your hair, love bombing from friends who are saviors. They will be on their phone, coaching them and telling them exactly what to say. And don't think this isn't about money. Even from one child's foreskin, you can make 4 football fields of skin. This is a biotissue boon, and the market shows it. It is to increase by billions at 12% per rate per year, and organ farms are in the works. I hate to have the bad news. Testosterone is now a pill, and Rutgers University gives it out at orientation. Universities provide surgeries for free. The cultures and laws you need to know. Canada now has compelled speech in law. Conversion therapy laws are, this trans is the conversion, but the conversion therapy laws now call it the opposite. I view pronouns as a marker. They designate you into a group. They allow for discrimination, just as an armband, branding, style of clothes, or actual sex of our bodies instantly tells people if we are us or them. Cis is the enemy. Of course, they should have to ask us if we identify as cis, but that's the point. Trans doesn't care about you. It is about themselves. I even had to threaten a lesbian couple in my neighborhood. I grew up with their kids. I knew them for 10 years with lesbian action. How is this happening with legal action? Sorry. A high school lesbian couple was asked by their peers, so which one of you is going to trans? How is this right? Why is trans what we have in common with Iran? Every trans would definition is backwards. As Nina says, trans acted like they wanted a hand up, but they took a leg over. I like rewards better than punishment. I'm a softie. So my daughter was pretty surprised by my firm stance on this one. For leverage, mamas, you've got to use things like driving, phones, devices, even money. You can't buy back body parts. Driving is a privilege, not a right. Society decided a child is supposed to be responsible enough by the age of 16 to be put in charge of a 3,000-pound weapon. If you don't stop for a stop sign, it's not about you, it's about others. We use our turn signals to communicate to others. If I can't trust you with the lives of others, I can't trust you with the lives of others, but you can't care for yourself. You have to come at it from what they care about. Even paying her, I paid her to read and watch the lessons. It was money well spent, much cheaper than therapy. Trans suicide ideation and threat is after medication begins. Before that, it is manipulation. And one look at trans TikTok and the money of some of the kids pushers are making, and you'll want to throw up. So I even said to her, if the vet told us our dog would be so happy if we took off her front legs. Oh, you can't even imagine that? Oh, you'll see. They're going to be so happy. Would you believe it? No. We need to be also aware of what's called the lab coat effect. So my newly educated heart was constantly full of flusters, and I would blurt out, but everybody loves breasts. Or, I didn't even cut your brother. Or, we changed hormones in meat so it wouldn't hurt you. Or, I didn't even drag you at birth. Or, I made choices for your lifetime of health months before you were even conceived. I nursed you for 2 years, and on, just saying, we always think of their futures. Flossing, helmets, vegetables, education. It's all about what comes tomorrow, not today. And kids can't usually think of that. And the chronic pain, the dismemberment, the destruction is what broke me. I lived with chronic pain, and it's on me that she'd never truly understood what that means. After all, that's what we want for our children. But they still need to have the understanding of what disabilities are and loss of bodily freedom. I am out of pain now, thank goodness. Gender dysphoria, I see it as actually what's called BIID, and which is illegal to take surgery to the body to cure the mind. After all, it actually doesn't cure the mind. One surgeon tried it to cure, and the patient who amputated their limb just found the other limb that was remaining became problematic. It doesn't stop. We must fix the mind. And they always ask, who is gaining, who's benefiting from destroying your body? We must not obey. We have to pick child or woman or a man in a dress. Pick one. You cannot protect both. Not this way. So, trans is not kind nor LGB. Suicidal dangers after medicalization. Teach them we get one body. Do not support those going back to eugenic roots. Planned Parenthood, ACLU are lying outright. HRC is straight up pedos and trans pushers. Executive Order 15, know it. Insurance companies are mandated to pay for trans dismemberment. Girl Guides have men in tents. Check your charities' money sheets. And remember, when you read about a she, it may be a he. And you don't need to tell the parents. This is taught under anti-bullying at school, not sex ed. So it's not told to parents. It is not in the curriculum. It is through assemblies from outside people, which makes the parents or the moms, when you get home, instant bullies if you stand up for reality. This is what they're doing for manipulation. We must make a fuss. We must be the voice our children deserve. Hold the line. As Kelly J. Keene says, The house is on fire and we all need a bucket. As Rex Landy says, every bucket is welcome. I now do activism with Here She, and we have a letter campaign to get Kara Dansky and Exulansic onto Bill Maher. So email me at hereshe@gmail and recruit widely. Let's do this. Mamas unite. We will get the word out. They cannot cancel all of us. And mamas, come to the chats. We are here waiting for you with excitement, knowledge, warmth, and sisterhood. We need each other more than we have in a long time. It's time to gather and rally around again. Fists up, women's circle with the children in the middle. They cannot cancel all of us. Keep speaking. Be brave.
So we've got Sonia Gallego, who's from the UK. She's an international broadcast journalist who has reported from around Europe on politics and society. And she's going to talk to us today on how the transgender identity issue has taken precedence recently and what the effect has been on accurate reporting as well as women's rights. So thank you so much, Sonia. And it would be really interesting to hear your specific view on this because of, you're right in a way in the thick of it with all this being a journalist. So thanks so much, and over to you.
So let me go back to 2015, all those years ago. There was an extremely interesting op-ed that was published in the New York Times. Writer and Oscar-winning filmmaker Eleanor Burkett wrote a searing essay on the new sexism that was infiltrating our societies under the aegis of transgender rights. The essay, titled "What Makes a Woman," Burkett began by focusing on how the President Emeritus of Harvard, Lawrence H. Summers, who was frequently criticized by progressives for being called bullying and reactionary, was faced with a cavalcade of heavy criticism for saying that men and women have different brains. This, Summers said, would explain women's inherent ineptitude for STEM subjects, for example, and the justifiable outrage even prompted donors to withhold funds in protest. Yet a decade later, this very idea of a male brain and a female brain that came with inclinations such as liking pink, playing with dolls, and finding that the hardest thing about being a woman was deciding what to wear, thank you very much, Caitlin Jenner, came to be accepted not just as a truth, but the foundation for a so-called civil rights movement. And in my view, the basis for the current medical scandal engulfing our youth embodied as the trans child. Burkett argued that when Bruce Jenner confirmed his change of identity to Caitlin Jenner, he was reiterating the same sexist values that Summers had done, such as being so much more aware of their emotions, except now there was praise for this reductive notion. We as women, by virtue of our biology, are forced to navigate the world with a distinct set of challenges and experiences. And Burkett laid this bare by critiquing the ideas that were paving the way for this revisionist take on women. She warned then, as many do now, that dubbing the reality of our bodies as exclusionary was dangerous and as sexist to women as the idea that ladies can't science. There were letters of praise to the New York Times for daring to publish this piece that so eloquently voiced women's concerns. But, as you can imagine, booming louder in volume, but not necessarily in truth, were the howls of anger that followed. It predictably was condemned as an attack on trans-identifying men, without acknowledgement of the fact that at the heart of this essay was the notion that women do not want to be seen as a set of sex stereotypes, but as whole human beings, and that the appropriation of these stereotypes by wealthy men is regressive and hypocritical when women have fought against this their entire lives. Later that year, Caitlin Jenner was presented with the Glamour magazine's Women of the Year award. A fitting progression, in my view, for the women's magazine sector that has profited from women's discomfort with their own bodies. Although I didn't realize it at the time, this essay piqued me. Externally, I was still very much of the opinion, superficially, that trans women were women because, come on, didn't they have it so much harder? Wasn't their plight more dangerous? So we were being told. Bearing in mind that in my experience in life and in my career as a journalist, I knew full well that the lot of women was not comfortable in the least. I filed this away, though, deciding not to pay any attention to it because of the obvious cognitive dissonance. But it would bubble up. I remember during an assignment in Tunisia, I visited a home for women who were victims of human trafficking in Libya. The stories of how women were repeatedly raped, prostituted, even while pregnant, heavily pregnant, made me realize that there was no avoiding the fundamental truths at the heart of women's oppression. During this time as well, a war was raging in Iraq and Syria, where women were being killed, brutalized, and sex trafficked in the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Nothing could be more jarring than the truth of what was happening to women around the world on the basis of their sex. Yet this was apparently going unnoticed by predominantly liberal legacy media outlets in the West. As horrific stories abounded, such as that of the Nobel Peace Prize winner Nadia Murad's terrifying ordeal at the hands of Daesh, women in the West were being called out and hounded for simply referring to the lived reality of their sex bodies. The Women's March at the start of the Trump presidency was a case in point. The so-called pussy hats came under severe criticism because they were trans exclusionary. The fight to draw attention to the very basis of women's oppression, i.e. her ability to reproduce, was facing an existential threat by a president who saw women in a derogatory fashion and was being torn apart also by trans-identifying men who believed they too had ownership of the female experience. Liberal organizations such as the Women's March capitulated without a single fight. They apologized, they promised to do better, and became incorporated into this new male rights movement. In an interview with Grazia magazine, trans activist Monroe Bergdorf stated that women are getting feminism wrong by focusing on the source of our oppression, our sex bodies. Bergdorf's argument was that women are more than vaginas. Thanks for the reminder, Monroe. And we had to be inclusive of males in order to be accepted in the new liberal world order. Yet not a peep was heard from supposedly progressive women's magazines. It was accepted as a truth without any consideration of how this would come to affect women's rights. In fact, they are, and they continue to be fundamental in pushing and promoting this idea, this tactic of keeping women disassociated from themselves in favor of keeping cosmetic companies or fashion houses ticking along a profit. In 2018, as the Taliban were advancing in Afghanistan and carrying out a series of attacks in the capital, Kabul, President Trump nominated anti-abortionist Brett Kavanaugh as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And the march to make trans rights the civil rights cause was well underway. Gender was now replacing sex, and women were becoming social constructs. But there was no joined up thinking in how this would affect us or how it would impact our rights. In the UK, this was being stoked into a culture war, with Stonewall by now practically only campaigning on trans rights at the helm. In 2016, the then chair of the Women and Equalities Parliamentary Committee, Maria Miller, produced a report to introduce self-ID into the UK, replacing the previous gender recognition process. It had cross-party support, and during a time when the country was entering a politically toxic time post the Brexit referendum, it was being seen as a small advancement of progress in a country that was beginning to lose its collective sanity amid the debate over leaving the European Union. But something else was going on. Away from the rage of the Brexit debate, there began a surge in referrals to the Tavistock Gender Identity Development Service, known as GIDS, in particular among girls. It was an astonishing escalation. In the ashes of the Me Too and Believe Her movements, something was happening that was disproportionately affecting girls and young women, yet the media attention was focusing on male trans figures such as Bergdorf, Laverne Cox, Caitlyn Jenner, etc., etc. It was in 2019 when Deborah Cohen and Hannah Barnes bravely came out with reports of what was going on at GIDS and the program of dispensing puberty blockers to children self-identifying as the opposite sex for BBC's Newsnight. It was a revelation, and they bravely stood out among the affirmation culture that was being dispensed elsewhere under the guise of inclusivity and the LGBTQIA+ model that was being pushed by Stonewall et al. Barnes and Cohen bravely ripped off the cover of what was the latest promulgation of trans rights, and that was the transitioning of children and the effect of what that would have on their health and development. But the trans co-opted media, such as Pink News, did not like this at all and railed against their coverage. Now let's fast forward to today, and Hannah Barnes has just published her long-awaited book on GIDS. And even then, despite the enormity of this medical scandal, she's faced numerous difficulties in publishing it. But boy, are we glad that she managed to, and has now paved the way for an honest discussion on so-called trans children and how transitioning them has implications for their health. Also throughout this time, an extraordinary experiment was well underway in Scotland. The Scottish Prison Service introduced its gender identity and gender reassignment policy, where male prisoners would now be held according to which sex stereotype they identified with. It was developed with the Scottish Trans Alliance as well as Stonewall, and despite the alarms that were raised by some Scottish members of Parliament, it was implemented. In 2019, when a Scottish TV news report raised concerns about how female inmates were being subject to sexualized behavior by trans-identifying male inmates, the SPS disregarded them by saying it had committed to holding an open consultation to the policy and that it had been in operation successfully for the past numbers of years since 2014. Now, let's fast forward to this year, and the hubris of the Scottish Prison Service has come crashing down, as is that of the Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, on this issue. Many had not anticipated how this would come to affect societies, as concerns on the issue had been consigned to the sidelines of the press, with few outlets giving it the proper attention it deserved. I personally was dismayed at the attitude of certain editors and journalists who continue to see this as a niche issue without realizing the effect it would have on the safety of women and girls and taking the words of the Scottish government for granted. There was much confusion as to what it would entail, precisely because eminent journalists who had waxed lyrical about issues such as the Northern Highland Protocol hadn't bothered to research what this profound change to female protections would involve. And they got the details wrong. Reporters spoke of legal gender, not understanding that it was legal sex that could be changed in just 3 months without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and a promise to stick to their new legal sex in exchange for a £5 certificate that decreed it thus. The deliberate obfuscation of such vitally important information was then laid bare for all to see when the case of Adam Graham, otherwise known as Isla Bryson, came to light. Graham, a double rapist who assumed a trans identity after being arrested, was the eye-opener that forced reporters to acknowledge what had been going on. The continual fudging around his pronouns, especially that of the First Minister, proved too much for many, and support for her took a hit, especially in a nation like Scotland, which, if you'll forgive the stereotype, has a decidedly no-nonsense approach. The women didn't wish. A lot of the men didn't either. And it came to a shock that such a small niche issue was in part responsible for bringing down the leadership of a woman who had withstood several challenges during her time in office. Humbled by those she previously dismissed as homophobes, misogynists, and racists for not supporting the gender recognition reform bill, Sturgeon, a self-identifying feminist at her fingertips, is now estranged from the very people she promised to lead towards independence. A warning, in my opinion, for any politician that seeks to go down the road of enforcing the liberalization of legal fallacies and the outlets that promote them. Where just a few years ago, this was still new, the supposedly liberal civil rights movement that came fast off the Me Too movement, leaving it for dust in its wake, and cannibalized the Black Lives Matter movement as a way for middle-class men to assume their position in the pyramid of oppression. When rapists were deemed by a government to be the underdog in this fight between protecting women's single-sex spaces and a man's self-declared identity based on sex stereotypes, it jarred. It was not popular, and the mere fact of such issues being censored or tarred as too toxic or niche to give it its due consideration, the impact will be felt when legislation crashes into reality. Now, back to the New York Times. These few months have seen, in my view, a vindication of Eleanor Burkitt's essay. The paper finally published an important article on the health concerns of subjecting children to puberty blockers in November last year. Needless to say that given what we know now, thanks to the Cass interim report and the sterling work of Hannah Barnes in her book, Time to Think, among many others, these concerns were absolutely justified in my view. Pamela Paul followed it up a month later with an op-ed entitled Free to Be You and Me or Not, which extolled the virtues of liberating children from sex stereotypes rather than deploying them as a diagnostic tool of an ethereal, unfounded, quasi-religious system to which we all must adhere. The reaction was predictably followed by cries of transphobia, when in reality it was just a plea for children to be liberated from the constraints of gendered identities. And we are perhaps beginning to see a backbone developing in the old grey lady. They dared to publish Paul's op-ed in defense of J.K. Rowling's off the back of Megan Phelps Roper's just released podcast, The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. And she highlights the absurdity of the campaign against the writer and correctly calls it out as dangerous, defamatory character assassination, especially in light of the attempt on Salman Rushdie's life last year. Not once have any of Rowling's detractors mentioned what she said, that she has never disputed gender dysphoria, nor has she ever opposed allowing people to transition, and she has never denied trans-identifying people their right to exist, or indeed any of their human rights. The howls of protests from its millennial activist employees and assorted trans rights groups, even from The Onion, a satirical outlet, have forced the New York Times to push back by stating, and I quote, "Our journalism strives to explore, interrogate, and reflect on the experiences, ideas, and debates in society to help readers understand them. Our reporting did exactly that, and we're proud of it." This is a welcome turn of events. And as more and more evidence emerges of the harms that gender identity ideology does, as reflected in what was happening at the Tavistock JIDS, where 97.5% of children undergoing treatment were either on the autism spectrum or had other mental health issues, and that 80% of them had discovered they were same-sex attracted, we are staring dead in the eye of an egregious medical scandal. And we, as journalists, have a right and a duty to examine this without the loud influence of lobbies that profit from the fable of the trans child.
Do you think things are changing? Do you think more journalists are now understanding what's going on, or are they willing to speak out on this, or is there still a lot of resistance?
I think there is still a certain resistance, and I think we see that consistently in the articles which show trans-identifying men being described as she and her still. I'm slightly more hopeful now that IPSO have called for people to give their opinions about how the reporting around these issues should proceed. We've understandably seen the limits of what that places on accuracy, and certainly our jobs as reporters as well to report things as accurately as possible. But I think the work of, for example, Hannah Barnes is absolutely crucial. I think the op-eds are also another crucial point as well. But also, interestingly enough, I've noticed that also social media, not just Twitter, but also TikTok, is now becoming more open to having gender critical voices. They're not censoring them as much. And that's only happened in the last couple of months. I thought that was a very curious turn of events. And I do think that enough momentum is building up so that people can actually dictate exactly what the facts are on these situations, because it just got to the point where facts were being censored. And I think that's where we run into deeply, deeply dangerous territory, especially when it comes to reporting on medical scandals.
So we're now going to go to Amanda. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for coming. Now, Amanda's going to talk about her personal experience of being in a female prison with men and the impact it has on vulnerable women, also about the Scottish Government's deplorable actions. So thanks so much, Amanda, and over to you.
I was put in Cortonvale prison on remand, so I was never sentenced. Okay, so I was held on remand until I was to go to trial. And I was first put in Cortonvale, which is a women's prison. And, you know, it was, you know, it's horrendous. You can read I can send anyone my story or post it or put it on the website or anything, because at first I was anonymous. So now I'm quite willing to give anybody access to the emails and things that I've written that you might not have necessarily seen or known it was myself that had done that. So it's a women's only prison, but there are in Cortonvale, there are two to a cell. So there's 2 women in every cell. But I was held there only for 2 days because I think I was taken into the police cells on the Thursday night, and I had to appear at court on the Friday morning, and they decided that I was to be remanded. And the protocol must be that they take us to Cortonvale, which is miles away from Greenock Prison, miles and miles and miles away. And then they decide where we are eventually going to be placed. So it was decided that I would be placed in HMP Gateside, which is in Greenock. And I think it's the oldest prison in Scotland. So Cortonvale is a women's prison, but Gateside is a male prison. But they have a female wing now. There's only 50 women in that wing, 40 or 50 women in that wing. So it's still very male dominant, but there's a women's wing. So I didn't see any men when I was in Cortonvale, but I do worry that if there were any men in there, the cells were double cells, they weren't singular cells. So possibly these women could actually be sharing cells with these violent men, like Sonia said, the likes of Adam Graham, who calls himself Isla Bryceland or whatever it is. But when I was moved to, and also in Cortonvale, they do have showers, even though it's 2 to a cell, they have showers in their cell, so you can shower in privacy. When I was moved to Greenock, it was single cells, but those cells don't have showering facilities. So you had to shower in communal shower areas. And I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of Rona Hotchkiss, who speaks a lot on this. She was actually my governess when I was in Gateside. And I've said this a million times and I'll continue to say it. She is as lovely outside as she was to me inside. And I didn't know about any of this stuff that was going on. So, excuse me, she's just a genuine soul. So there's communal showers there. And when I got to Gateside, there were 2 men. I've since learned that these 2 men, and I'm almost 100% sure that these 2 men feature on the website called Trans Crime UK. So one of them, I'll just quickly tell you. So one of them goes by the name of, his name is Alan Baker, but his woman's name is Alex Stewart. So he was in Gateside when I was there. The dates match up and everything okay. So obviously I didn't know his male name because we weren't allowed to call him his male name. We weren't allowed to call him he. You know, he had to be treated like a woman, or else we could lose all our privileges. We could lose our visitation rights, you know, loads, everything, loads. We could actually be charged as well, or given a bad report, which then means the women who rely on a good report to be let out on parole or whatever the words are, that would be looked upon really, really badly. And it could be the difference between that woman getting home to her children and not, just by calling this man he. So his name is Alan Baker, but he goes by Alex Stewart if you want to look it up. When I was in there, he's a gay man. That's what I knew him as. So he was put in there for 19 years because he was 25 and he murdered a 36-year-old man. After having met this man via an online gay dating service, Baker stabbed Mr. Weir at least 16 times in the chest at his home. Judge Lord Boyd said Baker was guilty of a wicked and brutal attack. So this 19-year-old man has met a 36-year-old man on a gay dating site and stabbed him repeatedly 19 times. He was then put in Gateside prison with women. I don't care that it was a man that he murdered. It doesn't make any difference to me whether it was a man or a woman, because the Scottish Prison Service seem to think that it really makes a difference. We won't put any of these violent men who claim to be women into prison if they've committed violence against women, but we'll quite happily put them in if they've murdered men. Okay. So this man formed a relationship with a fellow trans-identified male, which means she was a woman. She was a murderer. She was called Sophie Eastwood. It was reported that they'd been subjecting female prisoners, witnessing them having sex, etc. And now this man, Alex, is apparently engaged to the child killer Naomi Faye. If anybody doesn't know who she is, look her up. Her and her wife murdered a 3-year-old child. She's apparently a lesbian and this man's gay, but now they're engaged in the prison. Now, I've heard about going gay for the stay, but I've never heard about going straight for the stay. So it doesn't even matter if these men come in and they're gay. It doesn't matter. Prison is a totally different environment, and you will never understand what it is like to be in there and what those women have to do to survive, unless you've actually experienced it. The other man that I was in with, we were supposed to call him Laura. Now, bear in mind, these are both men. None of them were taking hormones. None of them had any surgery. None of them were women before they came to prison. One was a gay male and one is a heterosexual male claiming to be a lesbian because he's claiming to be a woman. Now, this man was about 6'3". He was about 30 stone. And he had no hormones, no anything, as I've said before. And we all had to call him Laura. And he had committed crimes against women, really serious crimes. And you'll also be able to find him on Trans Crimes UK. We are subjected to these men who are extremely violent, whether it's towards women or not. And we have no choice but to accept these men. I wanted to touch on something that recently, because we have a case in the Scottish Parliament just now, I think it's called a Lessons Learned case about Adam Graham, aka Isla Bryceland. So the criminal, let me find it, the Justice Secretary, he was really annoying me. Here it is. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Veterans. This is a quote from what he said the other day. As MSPs, it falls on us in my view, to provide responsible, rational and compassionate leadership. And I hope the committee would agree that it would be abhorrent if any legitimate scrutiny of this matter is allowed to, wait for it, fuel the view that trans women, right, which are men, we know that, somehow impose an inherent risk to women. So change that sentence. It would be abhorrent if any legitimate scrutiny of this matter is allowed to fuel the view that men somehow impose an inherent risk to women. If we use the proper language, then nobody can really argue with that, because trans women are men and men do impose an inherent risk, and the statistics shows that. He then went on to say, that is clearly not the case, and I remain concerned that this view is even further marginalising trans individuals. As in any discussion involving the criminal justice system, we must also never forget that the victims who will be affected by these instances are also affected by the things that we say. I want to show you a statistic that I've seen from, I'm pretty sure it was Women's Place UK, evidence submitted to Parliament in 2021 by Professor Rosa Friedman, Professor Kathleen Stock and Professor Alice Sullivan on offending rates calculated from the Ministry of Justice. So that's our Ministry of Justice, that's our official statistics. You can't argue with them even if you try. Male prisoners who identify as transgender women appear to be more likely to be imprisoned for sexual offences than other male prisoners. And they have given a respective figure of 59% v 17%. So 59% of men who claim to be women. So yes, there is a difference, but now we have this sacred caste of men who can just claim to be women without doing anything at all, and nobody can say anything. Nobody can the women in prison, sorry, they can't say anything, they can speak about reality, they can get away from it, they can't have a voice, they can't do anything. They were speaking about, I think it was Pauline McNeill brought up, he read out part of my testimony, and I don't know how she got it, she's obviously seen it online. She read it out and she said that she had already brought it up in a parliamentary way, and that she was fobbed off and told that it wasn't true and that it was lies, etc. So, but also Rona Hotchkiss said the same thing, and Pauline McNeill brought that up. So basically what Pauline McNeill was saying from my point of view was, okay, you might have a bias and you don't want to listen to a woman who's been in prison. Well, here's a prison governess who's got, I think, 30 years experience, telling you the exact same thing as what the prisoner is saying. So if you're going to do it on a class basis or, you know, whatever it is, then what you're going to do. And basically this woman and the Ministry of Justice Secretary called both of us a liar. So I managed to trawl through a lot of prison footage from documentaries from prisons from years ago, and I managed to find a clip that shows you the communal showers in Gateside HMP Greenock. I don't tell lies. I've got no reason to tell lies. I'm not looking for compensation. I have nothing to gain from this apart from helping these women who don't have a voice. So I managed to find that clip and I've sent it to Pauline. These women are, everything I've said, they are showering with men, they are naked and they are at risk. And I also want to say, even putting single showers in the single cells, it doesn't matter. We still have our dignity and our respect and whatever. Even if they have their penis cut off, we still don't want them in there. One man in a prison with 40 women can totally change that dynamic. One woman put in a prison with 50 men, it's a very different story. These women need to be heard, and thank you.
So we're now going to go to Jill Raymond. She is a Greenham woman, lesbian ecofeminist, reactivated by the Threat to Women and Girls from Gender Identity lobby. She is active in WDI UK and in many other things, and is going to, and also is one of the reasons we have such great breakout rooms where women could get together, and has done a fantastic job on that. She's now got together WDI women and others to go to the House of Parliament committee rooms, talk to the House of Lords and other parliamentarians, and is going to give us a report. So congratulations on your brilliant work, Jill, both at Greenham and now you're reactivated. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. Yeah, it does feel a bit like being reactivated, because I'm well into my being a pensioner. But like a lot of us sort of second wave crones, we weren't expecting to have to sort of come out and do this, but some of us just like, how can you resist, really? How can you not? So some of you might remember a few weeks ago in January, we had a very sudden opportunity to go and speak in the House of Lords, hosted by Baroness Nicholson. I'll just give you a bit of a summary on that. But Baroness Nicholson's been a long time feminist. She was originally in the House of Commons. She's a Conservative MP. She's now in the House of Lords. She's 80, at least 80. And she's I mean, I need older women to sort of keep me going and inspire me. So it's actually quite helpful in a way that she's a bit older than me. Anyway, I wrote a letter prompted by the Gender Recognition Reform Act of Scotland from a lesbian perspective. And a week later, she'd invited WDI to bring a group of lesbians to talk about it. So that was done really quickly, and it was a lesbian-only group that went. So by the end of that meeting, everyone was really moved. There were quite a lot of parliamentarians coming and going. Others sent their aides, and Baroness Nicholson said, this has just been so interesting and so useful and so moving, and I hope we can do it again. So we're immediately in email dialogue with her, really, and we managed to agree the date we gave us about 5 weeks to prepare for it. And she had chosen the topic to be conversion therapy. I mean, partly because there is a bill in Parliament. It could take all year to go through, but it obviously it needs a lot of amendments and discussion. But those of you that aren't in the UK, I'll just explain that the House of Commons, we have our members of Parliament are in the House of Commons, and they are the main legislators on bills going through, and they are elected. And the House of Lords tends to be the elders, and they are not elected. So they have a different, they're in a different position, and they have a slightly different role. And a lot of what they do is overseeing and behind the scenes influencing what's happening in the Commons, where they get a chance to. So yeah, she'd suggested that we did a panel on conversion therapy stroke practice, and so that wasn't going to need to be a lesbian only delegation, and we had more time to prepare for it. So we decided that on Mondays we have a UK meeting, so it was done like through our weekly Monday meetings, that we would go to groups outside of WDI and do a call out for panelists for this to talk on this conversion therapy business. So we got in touch with Safe Schools Alliance and thoughtful therapists and parents of rapid onset gender dysphoria children, because we felt that they would have direct experience of the whole issue from different points of view. Obviously, the therapists are in a different position from the parents. We know that therapists that are not doing affirmation are losing their jobs or just leaving because CAMHS is in total disarray anyway. So we had a few responses. It was a bit nerve-wracking to start with because we thought, oh God, is anyone even going to be prepared to do this? It's quite a public facing position to put yourself in. But we did have some responses, some really interesting emails came in, and we started to break up in. I'll talk a bit about the process because it's actually quite a lot of invisible work that goes into getting to this point. And so we had a small group, a working party, to work on the House of Lords things, and different women took slightly different roles within the group. So they all these responses to the call out needed individual email replies, because there was no sort of generic reply you could do to these letters, which were really quite distressing, some of them to read. So what we did was we invited them that expressed interest to a Zoom meeting where they could meet each other and they could meet us as a core team, and we could to explain to them a bit about the process of appearing in this committee room. And that was a really useful thing to do, and it was a really interesting thing to do as well, because none of them knew each other. They were from from very different sort of stories that they came through. They were all mothers. And that was the one thing that they had in common. And we did an initial go round, and they just sort of said a little bit about how they'd heard about it and about themselves. Then we did another, and the core team, we talked a bit about what our involvement in WDI. And then we did another go round where they actually had loosened up a little bit to talk about what they might want to say in the committee room at the House of Lords. And by the end of it, they all started to recognise each other's life experiences, and they started to really open up and connect. So then we had quite a more open chat, and it was you could see them all sort of gaining confidence and the relief of being able to be real and speak about what they really felt. Because like the first one would say, well, really, I don't think that men can be women, but you can't really say that, and by the end of it, they realized that every single one of them thought the same thing. So they ended up with a lot more confidence about that. So another thing that we did was we asked the Baroness if we could invite our own MPs, because last time she'd invited parliamentarians. We didn't have time to even think about something like that, but she said, you're welcome to invite your own MPs and any other parliamentarians like in the House of Lords. So some of us did that, and I'm not sure that any of them turned up, but I had a reply from a Baroness, Jenny Jones, in fact, who is being incredibly isolated in the Green Party because she's gender critical, and she emailed me back straight away and she said she wasn't going to be able to come, but she was so delighted to hear that we were doing it and pleased that I'd invited her and to keep her in touch. So part of what our strategy needs to be is to expand the number of parliamentarians that are prepared to come and listen to these committee meetings. So another thing we did that was new was because all the women, they were incredibly brave and prepared to do this, and we invited them all to bring a +1 so that they weren't coming on their own. One mother said that could she bring 2 friends, because there was her and 2 other mothers, they'd worked together. I think they all had kids in the same school, so she could bring 2 friends. And then we heard through Tracy, who's here today, Tracy, she's got contact with 4 women in Northern Ireland who were keen to come over and come to the House of Lords and talk about how it is in the north of Ireland, and then also a teenage girl and her mum who were in the Republic at the last minute applied to get passports so that they could come in as well to this meeting. So we had quite a contingent from Northern Ireland, and Tracy put something in that. Oh yeah. She invited invited the Northern Ireland Secretary of State. So basically, we had a room full, and a whole new lot of parliamentarians who came to the bit as it came before, except for Joanna Cherry. She came again, and she's obviously very pleased that these are happening. I have to say that the teenager who came from the Republic was an incredible speaker. She was so succinct, and she had so much support from her mother, but she really outlined really succinctly the situation of being in school. There's no safeguarding, the gaslighting from the teachers, the peer pressure from her school kids, the science teacher lying about human biology, the capture through social media, and the secretiveness of the parents not being informed. And the main message that they all put over really was that transitioning children is conversion therapy. But they all spoke from very different experiences. One, we had a lesbian mother, and we also had the spokeswoman from Safe Schools Alliance who opened the meeting, speakers. So they gave very personal testimonies, and this is what really works with parliamentarians, because they can all go and read reports or even newspaper reports or whatever, but they were moved. They were really, really moved, as they were with the lesbian delegation. Yeah, that's a gathering of us. At the end, photo opportunity in committee room number 1. With it, we also I booked a pub, so that's in one of the halls on the way out, and I booked a function room in a pub so that we could all have a bit of a private space to get over ourselves and have some supper, which was really nice and helpful. And one of the group organised a raffle, because WDI UK, we don't actually have any money, but we thought that we might be able to. We need to start getting our own money, so that was a part of that. The other thing that I would say as a sort of bit of a point of action for any of you that are in Twitter is do follow Baroness Emma Nicholson on Twitter. We had a couple of women in the Monday night group who were not able to come to the House of Lords. They just don't live near enough London, but they were ready to tweet when we sent them photographs, so that's another way of amplifying the experience. So yeah, we had a nice party, and hopefully we will be doing some more of this. But meanwhile, we've got the conference coming up in London, and that's enough for us in the UK to be going on with in the next month.